Maya Rodriguez had perfected the art of being invisible. Not literally, of course. That would have required actual alien technology, and heaven knows they weren't about to share that with a human. No, Maya's invisibility was the special kind reserved for service workers throughout the galaxy. The ability to stand right next to someone while they discussed how stupid you were, as if you weren't even there. She pushed her cleaning cart down the marble corridors of the Stellar Majesty, the most luxurious cruise ship in the Andromeda sector. 3 years she'd been mopping these floors, scrubbing these walls, and emptying waste receptacles for creatures who wouldn't know gratitude if it bit them on their various appendages. Which, considering some of the passengers, might actually be physically possible. The problem with humans, announced Lord Squishington, a particularly pompous Galaxian, whose body resembled a disco ball made of purple jelly, is that they simply lack the cranial capacity for higher reasoning. It's science, really. Maya continued polishing the viewport, her expression as neutral as Switzerland during a galactic war. Lord Squishington was holding court with his usual crowd of sycophants, all of whom nodded along as if he'd just revealed the secrets of the universe instead of recycling the same tired prejudices she heard every day. Indeed, agreed Captain Vortak, the ship's commanding officer, his reptilian features arranged in what he probably thought was a wise expression. We keep them around for menial tasks, naturally. They're quite good at following simple instructions. He gestured vaguely in Maya's direction without actually looking at her. This one has been adequately functional for several cycles. Maya had to admire the efficiency of it all. In one sentence, Captain Vortak had managed to dehumanize her, damn her with faint praise, and demonstrate his complete ignorance of the fact that she spoke 6 languages, held 2 engineering degrees, and could probably navigate this ship better than he could. But hey, who was counting? First Officer Glebo, a translucent blob creature who perpetually looked like he was about to apologize for existing, wobbled nervously. Perhaps we shouldn't discuss such matters in front of the help? Oh please, scoffed Chief of Security Krex, flexing his 4 arms in what Maya had learned was the Krogan equivalent of an eye roll. Humans barely understand their own primitive language, let alone sophisticated discourse. Look at it. Not even attempting to participate in the conversation. Maya looked up from her polishing with the kind of smile that service workers had perfected across the galaxy, polite, empty, and absolutely lethal, if you knew how to read it. Would you like me to clean around you, or should I come back later? See? Krex gestured triumphantly. Simple, task-oriented communication. No curiosity about the deeper philosophical implications of our discussion. Fascinating, Maya murmured, returning to her work. What was truly fascinating was how Krex had managed to become Chief of Security, despite apparently having the tactical awareness of a particularly dim asteroid. But she kept that observation to herself. The passengers continued their enlightened discussion about human inferiority, while Maya worked around them, cataloging every detail of their conversation, their habits, their schedules. Not because she was planning anything, of course. She just had the kind of mind that noticed things. Like how Captain Vortak always took his breakfast at 0800 hours sharp. How First Officer Glebo's anxiety spikes made him wobble in a predictable pattern. How Chief Krex's 4 arms were impressive for intimidation but created obvious blind spots in his peripheral vision. You know, just in case such information ever became relevant. As Maya finished her shift and headed to her quarters, she passed the ship's security center where Krex was briefing his team on the day's non-events. Through the open door, she could hear him explaining to his officers how humans were physically weak, strategically naive, and emotionally unstable under pressure. Maya paused just long enough to make a mental note: emotional stability under pressure. That was definitely going on her list of things to remember. After all, you never knew when you might need to prove a point. The first sign something was wrong came at 0347 hours, when the ship's lights flickered and the gentle hum of the engines stuttered like a nervous diplomat. Maya was in the middle of her night shift, cleaning the observation deck, when the emergency klaxons began wailing with all the subtlety of a dying space whale. Attention passengers and crew, came Captain Vortak's voice over the intercom, with just a hint of what Maya generously interpreted as controlled panic. We are experiencing minor technical difficulties. Please remain calm and return to your quarters immediately. Maya didn't need to be a tactical genius to know that minor technical difficulties was captain speak for we're about to have a very bad day. She'd been on enough ships to recognize the specific sound of docking clamps engaging without invitation. The Stellar Majesty was being boarded. She quickly pushed her card into the nearest maintenance closet, a cramped space that smelled of industrial cleaner and broken dreams. Through the ventilation grate, she had a perfect view of the main corridor, which was convenient because that's exactly when things got interesting. The pirates came through the airlock like a plague of heavily armed locusts. The Crimson Claw, if their rather theatrical red uniforms were any indication. Maya had heard stories about Captain Razortooth and his crew, none of which ended with everyone sitting around sharing pleasant memories over tea and cookies. Captain Razortooth himself was exactly what you'd expect from someone who chose that particular nom de guerre. 7 feet of scar tissue and bad attitude, with teeth that could probably cut through starship hull plating. His lieutenant, a sleek creature called Vex, moved with the kind of predatory grace that suggested she enjoyed her work a little too much. "Ladies, gentlemen in assorted life forms," Razortooth announced, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of making people regret their life choices. "Welcome to your hostile takeover. Please keep your appendages where we can see them and try not to do anything stupid." Maya watched from her hiding spot as the ship's security team rushed to respond. Chief Krex appeared first, all 4 arms reaching for his weapons with the kind of dramatic flair that looked impressive right up until the moment 3 pirates stunned him unconscious before he could clear his holsters. "Well," Maya whispered to herself, "that was embarrassing." The rest of the security team lasted approximately 12 seconds longer, which was generous considering they seemed to have learned their tactics from the same school of charge blindly into superior firepower that had made military historians weep for centuries. Captain Vortak arrived next, his reptilian features arranged in what Maya assumed was supposed to be intimidating authority, but mostly looked like constipation. "I demand to know the meaning of this outrage." "The meaning," Vex replied smoothly, "is that we now own your ship, your cargo, and your passengers. The vault codes would be appreciated, along with your cooperation in making this as painless as possible. I'll never surrender to common criminals." Razortooth sighed with the weariness of someone who'd had this exact conversation roughly 1,000 times before. "Stun him. We'll get the codes from someone more reasonable." As Captain Vortak crumpled to the deck, Maya had to admit the pirates were depressingly efficient. Within minutes, they had the entire ship's crew, and all the passengers herded into the main dining hall like prize livestock. She could hear Lord Squishington's panic bleating from 3 decks away. "Listen carefully," Razortooth addressed his captives. "We want the vault codes, the cargo manifest, and anything else valuable you might have forgotten to mention. You have 1 hour to decide who's going to be helpful, and who's going to be taking an unscheduled spacewalk." Maya watched as the passengers immediately began pointing fingers and offering bribes. Lord Squishington, in particular, seemed eager to explain how his vast wealth made him far too valuable to space, while simultaneously suggesting that perhaps the primitive humans might be more expendable. "Humans?" scoffed one of the pirates, a particularly ugly specimen with more scars than sense. "Why do these ships even carry them? They're useless for anything important." "Cheap labor," Vex replied dismissively. "Though I suppose we could space them first, just to make a point." Maya listened to this exchange with the kind of detached interest usually reserved for particularly boring academic lectures. It was fascinating, really, how quickly everyone had written off the human janitor hiding in the maintenance closet. She supposed she should feel insulted. Instead, she felt something much more useful, motivated. After all, they'd just made this personal. Maya had always been good at being ignored, but this was taking it to Olympic levels. The pirates had literally walked past her hiding spot 6 times in the last hour, and not one of them had bothered to check the maintenance closet. Apparently, the same prejudices that made her invisible to the passengers worked just as well on criminals. She'd used that hour productively, crawling through the ventilation system and mapping the pirates' positions. 12 total, if her count was correct. 3 guarding the hostages, 2 in the engine room, 1 on the bridge, and 6 scattered throughout the ship looking for valuables and making sure no one was hiding in the obvious places. They hadn't bothered checking the non-obvious places, because who would hide in a maintenance tunnel? Certainly not a primitive human who was too stupid to understand sophisticated tactics. Maya began with the classics. A loose gravity plate here, a mysteriously jammed door there, some lights that flickered at strategically annoying moments. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of minor technical difficulties that plagued all starships and made everyone's life slightly more irritating. "This piece of junk is falling apart," complained one pirate as he struggled with a door that had suddenly decided to require a 17-digit override code. Typical alien engineering. His companion, a reptilian creature with more muscles than brains, shrugged. "Rich people ships. All flash, no substance. We'll be done here soon enough." Maya smiled in the darkness of the air duct above them. Rich people ships were actually built to incredibly high standards, which was why they came with comprehensive maintenance manuals that explained exactly how each system could malfunction. She'd read every single one of them during her 3 years of service. Professional development was important, after all. Her next target was the communication array. Nothing dramatic, just a slight adjustment to the frequency modulators that would make it impossible for the pirates to contact their ship. The beauty of it was that the system would appear to be functioning normally from their end, but somehow their messages just wouldn't get through. "Crimson Claw, this is Razortooth. Respond." Maya listened to the captain's increasingly frustrated attempts to reach his backup while she rerouted power from the artificial gravity generators in Section C. Not enough to shut them down completely, just enough to make walking feel like wading through thick syrup. She was particularly proud of her work in the dining hall, where she'd managed to adjust the atmospheric processors to create a barely noticeable but deeply unpleasant smell. Nothing toxic, mind you. Just the kind of odor that made everyone slightly nauseous and irritable. The pirates had started snapping at each other within 20 minutes. "This whole ship stinks," complained the guard nearest to Lord Squishington. "How do these people live like this?" "Maybe it's the aliens," suggested his partner. "Some of them smell weird when they're scared." Maya had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing. The atmospheric processors were her own little masterpiece. A careful blend of recycled air and synthetic pheromones that triggered the stress response in most sentient species. She'd discovered it by accident during her first year, when a malfunctioning scrubber had made everyone on Deck 7 irritable for a week. But her real stroke of genius came when she heard 2 pirates discussing their plan to sell the passengers to slavers regardless of whether they got the ransom. That was when Maya decided to stop playing with the minor inconveniences and start getting creative. She started with the weapons locker. The pirates had been smart enough to secure their own armory, but they'd made the classic mistake of assuming that human cleaning supplies were harmless. Maya had spent 3 years learning exactly which chemicals created which reactions when mixed in which proportions. Some combinations cleaned stubborn stains. Others created toxic gas when exposed to heat. And some, when applied to the right surfaces, could cause weapons to malfunction in very specific ways. "My stunner's not working," complained one pirate, frantically checking his weapon. "The charge indicator says it's full, but nothing happens when I fire." "Mine too," said another. "What kind of cheap knockoff gear did we bring?" Maya watched from her perch in the air duct as 6 pirates discovered that their weapons had been mysteriously neutralized by what appeared to be a manufacturing defect. She'd been very careful to make it look like equipment failure rather than sabotage. After all, she was just a primitive human who couldn't possibly understand sophisticated technology. As the hour deadline approached, Maya prepared for Phase 2 of her plan. The pirates thought they were dealing with a ship full of helpless passengers and incompetent crew. They were about to learn the difference between being invisible and being ignored. Maya had always believed that violence should be approached like any other maintenance problem, with the right tools, proper planning, and a complete understanding of the systems involved. The human body, as it turned out, was just another system that could be adjusted when necessary. She encountered her first test subjects in the laundry room, where 2 pirates were interrogating one of the ship's engineers about the location of the backup vault codes. The engineer, A nervous Vraxian with more tentacles than backbone was providing information with the enthusiasm of someone who really didn't want to be spaced. "Please," the engineer was saying, his voice high with panic. "I don't know anything about the secondary systems. I just maintain the atmospheric recyclers." "Then you're useless," said the first pirate, a scarred humanoid with the kind of face that suggested he'd lost several arguments with blunt objects. "Vex said to space anyone who can't contribute." Maya emerged from behind an industrial washing unit with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. Which technically she did. "Excuse me, but you're blocking the plasma torch." Both pirates turned to stare at her with the kind of confused expression usually reserved for mathematical theorems or abstract art. The first pirate recovered quickly. "What are you doing here, human? You should be with the other hostages." "I'm doing laundry," Maya replied reasonably, gesturing to the plasma torch mounted on the wall behind them. "These uniforms don't clean themselves, and blood stains are particularly difficult to remove if you don't treat them quickly." The second pirate, who had apparently been designated as the group's intellectual, frowned. "What blood stains?" "The ones you're about to make," Maya said, and reached for the plasma torch. The first pirate laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You think you can threaten us with a cleaning tool? Humans are even stupider than I thought." Maya powered up the torch, its blue-white flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. "It's not a cleaning tool. It's a cutting tool. I use it to remove stubborn stains from metal surfaces." She paused, considering. "Organic stains, too, when necessary." The pirates exchanged glances. This wasn't going according to script. Humans were supposed to be cowering and helpless, not calmly discussing the proper application of industrial equipment. "Look, lady," the first pirate said, reaching for his weapon. "Just back off and no one gets hurt." He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. He tried again, frantically checking the charge indicator. Still nothing. "Faulty equipment," Maya observed sympathetically. "That's what happens when you buy cheap knockoffs. Here, let me show you how a quality tool works." What followed was less a fight than a demonstration of applied physics. 3 years of moving heavy cleaning equipment had given Maya the kind of practical strength that came from actual work rather than gymnasium posturing. The plasma torch, meanwhile, was designed to cut through starship hull plating. It worked even better on organic materials. The first pirate discovered this when he tried to grab the torch from her hands. The second pirate learned it when he attempted to tackle her from behind. The Vraxian engineer, meanwhile, stared in shock as the soft-spoken human janitor methodically disabled 2 armed criminals without raising her voice above a conversational tone. "You might want to find somewhere safe to hide," Maya suggested, cleaning the torch with a maintenance cloth. "Things are about to get a bit more complicated." The engineer fled, his tentacles making a sound like wet spaghetti hitting the floor. Maya checked her chronometer. 43 minutes until the pirate's deadline. She had work to do. Her next stop was the engine room, where she found 2 more pirates arguing over the ship's power distribution controls. They were trying to reroute energy from the life support systems to boost their communications array, which showed a touching faith in their own technical abilities. "That's not how you do it," Maya said, stepping into the room with the same casual confidence she'd used to correct someone's mopping technique. Both pirates spun around, weapons drawn. These ones had apparently learned from their colleagues' mistakes and were using projectile weapons instead of energy-based stunners. "Stay back," one of them shouted. "We'll shoot." "With what?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. "You're holding slug throwers in a pressurized compartment next to the main reactor. Fire those things in here and you'll either decompress the ship or cause a containment breach that kills everyone, including yourselves." The pirates looked at their weapons, then at the reactor, then at each other. You could practically hear the gears turning in their heads. "She's bluffing," the first pirate decided. "Humans don't understand starship engineering." "Actually," Maya said, pulling out a maintenance scanner, "I understand it better than you do. For example, did you know that the power coupling you're standing next to is currently overloaded by about 30%? That's why it's making that humming sound." Both pirates looked down at the deck plating, which was indeed humming ominously. "You've got about 15 seconds before that coupling fails and electrocutes everything within a 3-meter radius," Maya continued conversationally. "I'd recommend moving, but that's just a suggestion." The pirate scrambled away from the coupling just as it sparked and died, plunging half the engine room into darkness. 12 seconds, Maya said approvingly. "Better than I expected." In the darkness that followed, Maya demonstrated why 3 years of working in cramped maintenance spaces had given her excellent spatial awareness and superior close-quarters combat skills. The pirates discovered that being able to see didn't help much when your opponent knew exactly where every pipe, conduit, and sharp edge was located. Maya left them unconscious but breathing, mostly because dead pirates would raise questions she didn't want to answer yet. She had 4 more to go, and only 37 minutes left. Time to get creative. Captain Razortooth was beginning to suspect that his carefully planned heist was developing complications. 6 of his crew had missed their last 3 check-ins, the ship's systems were malfunctioning in increasingly creative ways, and someone had been systematically sabotaging their equipment with what appeared to be cleaning supplies. He stood in the main corridor, his massive frame casting shadows that would have terrified most sentient beings, and tried to figure out what was going wrong. His remaining crew members looked nervous, which was understandable. Pirates who specialized in easy targets weren't accustomed to actual resistance. Captain reported Vex, her sleek form moving with predatory grace despite the obvious tension in her posture. "We've lost contact with the engine room team and the search squads. The hostages are still secure, but something's interfering with our communications." Razortooth growled, a sound like a malfunctioning hyperdrive. "Interference from what?" "This is a luxury cruise ship, not a military vessel." "Unknown. But the interference is localized and appears to be moving through the ship's systems." That was when Maya stepped into the corridor from a maintenance hatch, her cleaning uniform pristine despite the evening's activities. She carried a mop bucket in one hand and a plasma torch in the other, which should have been an incongruous combination but somehow managed to look perfectly natural. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but you're blocking the corridor. I need to get to the cargo bay." Razortooth stared at her with the kind of expression usually reserved for discovering that your breakfast was still alive and trying to escape. "You're human." "That's very observant," Maya replied. "I'm also the person who's been systematically dismantling your crew for the past hour." "Small galaxy, isn't it?" Vex's hand moved to her weapon, a high-end military-grade disruptor that could probably vaporize a small shuttle. "That's impossible. Humans don't have the intelligence or skill for tactical operations." "You're right," Maya agreed. "We're terrible at tactics. We prefer to think of it as applied problem-solving." She gestured with the plasma torch. "For example, I had a problem with 12 armed pirates threatening innocent people. So I solved it by reducing the number of armed pirates to 2. Razortooth's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile on a less terrifying creature. "You killed my crew?" "Oh no," Maya said, sounding slightly offended. "I'm not a killer. I'm a janitor. I clean up messes, I don't make them. Your crew is just temporarily incapacitated. They'll wake up eventually, assuming they receive proper medical attention." "You're going to die for this," Razortooth snarled, drawing his own weapon. A massive plasma cannon that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought subtlety was a sign of weakness. "Probably," Maya conceded. "But not today, and not by you. See, I've been herding you two toward the cargo bay for the past 20 minutes. Every door you couldn't open, every corridor that was blocked, every system malfunction that forced you to take a different route. You're exactly where I want you." Vex looked around the corridor with the kind of dawning horror usually reserved for people who just realized they'd been outmaneuvered by someone they'd underestimated. "The cargo bay is at the end of this corridor." "Yes, it is," Maya said cheerfully. "And I've spent the last hour filling it with a carefully balanced mixture of industrial cleaning compounds, pressurized gases, and unstable chemical reactions. It's quite impressive, actually. The kind of explosion that would crack a ship's hull and kill everyone in the surrounding sections." Razortooth laughed, a sound like broken glass in a blender. You're bluffing. Humans don't have the technical knowledge to create improvised explosives. You're right again, Maya said. We don't create explosives. We create cleaning solutions that happen to become explosives when combined in the right proportions under the right conditions. It's all about understanding the chemistry. She pulled out a small remote detonator from her pocket, holding it with the same casual confidence she'd hold a spray bottle. The blast will be contained to the cargo bay if I trigger it now. But if you fire those weapons in this corridor, the energy discharge will destabilize the mixture and turn the entire ship into a very large and very bright firework. X's weapon wavered slightly. She's lying. Test the theory, Maya suggested. Fire your weapon. See what happens. Of course, if I'm right, you'll have about 3 seconds to contemplate your poor life choices before the ship disintegrates. Razortooth's cannon remained pointed at Maya, but his finger had moved away from the trigger. What do you want? I want you to surrender your weapons, release the hostages, and submit to ship's justice. I want you to do it politely and without any more threats or violence. And I want you to do it in the next 30 seconds, because that's how long the mixture has left before it reaches critical instability. Maya checked her chronometer with the kind of casual precision that suggested she'd planned this conversation down to the second. 28 seconds now. This is insane, Vex hissed. You're threatening to blow up the ship with yourself on it. I'm threatening to blow up the cargo bay, Maya corrected. The explosion will be contained to that section, assuming you don't do anything stupid like firing high-energy weapons in a pressurized corridor filled with reactive chemicals. She paused, considering. Although now that I think about it, I should probably mention that I've been gradually increasing the atmospheric pressure in this section for the past 10 minutes. Any sudden shock could trigger a chain reaction that would be problematic. Razortooth and Vex exchanged glances. They were professional criminals who'd spent years perfecting the art of calculated risks. This wasn't a calculated risk. This was a conversation with a polite lunatic who spoke about mass destruction the way other people discussed the weather. 15 seconds, Maya noted helpfully. The weapons hit the floor with a clatter that seemed unnaturally loud in the pressurized corridor. Excellent choice, Maya said approvingly. Now, shall we go release the hostages? I'm sure they're getting tired of breathing recycled air with anxiety-inducing pheromones. The hostages were released with the kind of anticlimactic efficiency that characterized most of Maya's work. She simply walked into the dining hall, politely asked the guards to surrender their weapons, and watched as they complied with the desperate enthusiasm of people who'd heard about the fate of their colleagues. Captain Vortak, who had regained consciousness just in time to witness his janitor casually disarming armed pirates, stared at Maya with the kind of expression usually reserved for witnessing impossible phenomena. How did you? Highly applied chemistry, Maya replied, securing the pirates' weapons in a maintenance cart. Combined with basic knowledge of ship systems, elementary psychology, and 3 years of being ignored by people who assumed I was too stupid to understand what they were saying. Lord Squishington, who had spent the last hour offering to trade human crew members for his own safety, wobbled uncertainly. But you're just humans are. Primitive? Maya suggested helpfully. Intellectually inferior? Incapable of sophisticated reasoning? She began mopping the floor around the captured pirates with the same methodical precision she brought to all her tasks. It's interesting how those assumptions worked out for you. First Officer Glebo, whose translucent form was still trembling with residual fear, wobbled forward. What happened to the other pirates? They're in various states of unconsciousness throughout the ship, Maya said, wringing out her mop with practiced efficiency. I've secured their weapons and isolated them in sections where they can't cause any more trouble. They'll need medical attention, but nothing that won't heal. Chief of Security Krex, who had awakened to find his security team had been rescued by the ship's janitor, flexed his forearms uncertainly. The humans, you fought 12 armed pirates by yourself? I didn't fight them, Maya corrected. Fighting implies a contest between equals. I solved a problem using the tools and knowledge available to me. The fact that those tools included plasma torches and industrial chemicals is incidental. She finished mopping and looked around the dining hall with the satisfied expression of someone who'd completed a job well done. I should probably mention that I've recorded everything that happened here today. The pirate attack, the crew's response, the passengers' behavior, and the various comments about human intelligence and expendability. The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet usually associated with deep space or failing life support systems. Those recordings will be included in my incident report, Maya continued conversationally, along with my recommendations for improving ship security and crew training protocols. I'm sure the shipping company will find them very interesting. Captain Vortak cleared his throat, the sound like a small landslide. Maya, I want to apologize for any misunderstandings about your capabilities. Perhaps we should discuss a promotion to the security department? Thank you, but no, Maya said, returning her mop to its proper place on the cart. I like my job. I'm good at it, and it lets me learn about ship systems that most people find boring. Plus, it gives me the kind of mobility and access that proved useful today. She paused, considering. Although I would appreciate if people stopped assuming I can't understand their conversations. It's not that I mind being underestimated, but it does get tedious after a while. X, who was sitting on the floor with her hands bound behind her back, looked up at Maya with something that might have been professional respect. You planned this entire operation, didn't you? From the moment we boarded. I planned for the possibility, Maya admitted. 3 years of cleaning up after people gives you a lot of time to think about contingencies. What would happen if the ship was attacked? What would happen if the crew was incapacitated? What would happen if someone needed to take action but everyone else was too busy being frightened or incompetent? She checked her chronometer and began pushing her cart toward the exit. I should get back to work. The corridor outside has scorch marks from the plasma torch, and someone tracked mud through the observation deck. These things don't clean themselves. Wait, Lord Squishington called out, his gelatinous form quivering with what might have been embarrassment. What you did today, it was extraordinary. Heroic, even. Don't you want recognition? Rewards? A parade? Maya paused in the doorway and looked back at the assembled passengers and crew. For just a moment, her expression softened into something that might have been amusement. I want you to remember that the next time you're discussing human intelligence while I'm cleaning around you, I want you to remember that the person you're ignoring might be the same person who saves your life when everything goes wrong. She resumed pushing her cart, her voice carrying back to them as she disappeared into the corridor. Besides, someone has to clean up this mess, and I'm very good at cleaning up messes. Captain Vortak watched her go, then turned to address his crew and passengers. I think, he said slowly, we need to have a conversation about our assumptions regarding human capabilities. In the corridor, Maya continued her work, humming softly to herself as she cleaned the scorch marks from the walls. Tomorrow she would file her incident report and return to her normal routine of maintaining the ship and being ignored by people who thought they were superior to her. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, nobody was discussing human intelligence while she worked. It was, she reflected, a nice change of pace. The Stellar Majesty resumed its course through the stars, its passengers a little wiser, its crew a little more respectful, and its janitor quietly satisfied with a job well done. After all, someone had to keep the galaxy clean. And Maya Rodriguez was very, very good at her job.